A great feast lay before them, a spectacle of glittering gold and lavish indulgence that could seduce even the most discerning of hearts. The air was thick with the scent of rare spices and the murmurs of 1,000 nobles, all gathered in the grand hall of Babylon, a city that once boasted the riches of the known world. In that opulent setting, where the echoes of triumph mingled with the clinking of goblets and the rustle of silken garments, something extraordinary unfolded, an event that would etch its memory into the soul of every witness. King Belshazzar, with a countenance carved from arrogance and indulgence, reigned over the revelry. His eyes danced with mirth as he raised his chalice high, celebrating a conquest of spirit over restraint. The silver vessels, which had once graced the sacred temple in Jerusalem, were repurposed for the indulgence of this night of excess. It was an act that defied reverence, a blatant display of hubris that dared to challenge what had been held sacred for generations. His voice boomed across the hall as he toasted to a future of endless victories, oblivious to the foreboding clouds gathering in the corners of his own soul. In the midst of the swirling decadence, a strange sensation began to creep over the gathering. A murmur of unease, almost imperceptible at first, threaded its way through the laughter and song. Suddenly, as if summoned by a force beyond mortal ken, a hand appeared, a hand not born of flesh and bone but conjured from the very essence of the divine. It moved with a deliberate grace, its touch almost tender, as it traced symbols upon the ancient stone of the palace wall. Each stroke of the hand carried an ominous weight, an unreadable message that defied the comprehension of those present. The moment the first symbol emerged, time itself seemed to pause. Belshazzar's eyes, once gleaming with self-assurance, widened in horror as he beheld the sight. His face drained of every trace of color, replaced by a ghostly pallor that spoke of an inner terror unfathomable to the most hardened heart. The noble courtiers, who had reveled only moments before, now sat frozen in a state of dread, their whispers dying in midair. No one could deny the gravity of that surreal occurrence. A hand writing words that no man could fathom, words that bore the promise of an irrevocable fate. The symbols, etched in a language older than memory itself, danced on the wall as if animated by a will beyond the reach of mortal eyes. It was as if the very spirit of an ancient power had manifested to rebuke the insolence of a king who believed himself untouchable. In that fateful instant, the merriment of the feast transformed into a silent requiem, as if the walls themselves were mourning the impending doom that the message foretold. Behind the layers of fear and silence, an undercurrent of memories began to stir, a recollection of a time when Babylon shone at the pinnacle of human achievement. The city, resplendent with wonders like the fabled gardens and majestic monuments, had once been the crown jewel of a mighty empire. Its splendor had been rivaled only by the ambition of its rulers. Among them stood King Nebuchadnezzar, whose legacy was written in the annals of history with feats that defied mortal limits. Yet, within the echoes of his reign lay a cautionary tale, a story of a ruler whose pride had summoned divine retribution, forcing him to dwell among the beasts and graze upon the lowly grass of the earth until humility softened his hardened spirit. Now, as the divine hand continued its cryptic script, the memories of Nebuchadnezzar's downfall whispered through the corridors of time. The fallen king, who had once soared with the majesty of a conqueror, had been reduced to a state of animalistic submission, a living reminder that even the greatest among men were subject to the inscrutable judgment of a higher power. The contrast between the fates of two mighty kings, one who was humbled and later restored, and one who stood defiant in the face of sacred warnings, set the stage for a night that would forever alter the course of destiny. Belshazzar's heart pounded in his chest as the strange script unfurled across the cold stone. His mind raced with terror, trying to unravel the meaning behind the symbols that now dominated the scene. Every eye in the room sought answers, yet the silence was as profound as the void between the stars. The opulence of the surroundings did nothing to soften the chill that had gripped the gathering. Instead, it served as a stark reminder that no amount of earthly splendor could shield one from the decrees of a power far greater than any king. It was then that a familiar voice, tempered by years of wisdom and sorrow, pierced the tension like a shard of ice. A gentle yet firm reminder of past warnings echoed through the hall, a call to remember the man who had once interpreted dreams and visions for a humbled king. The memory of Daniel, the interpreter of mysteries, flickered in the minds of the onlookers. Whispers of his name reverberated among the courtiers as they recalled the man who had once spoken truth to power, revealing the hidden machinations of destiny that lay beneath the surface of human affairs. The court's anxiety grew as the regal figure of Daniel was summoned from the shadows of memory to stand before a king consumed by dread. The wise man, now an embodiment of steadfast resolve and measured authority, stepped forward to confront the grim portent that had descended upon them. His presence exuded a quiet power, a reassurance born not of mere words but of a lifetime spent in communion with forces beyond mortal comprehension. As he drew nearer, his eyes met those of Belshazzar, and a silent conversation passed between them, a reminder of past transgressions and unheeded counsel. With measured steps and a voice that resonated with the weight of ancient prophecies, Daniel began to unravel the mystery behind the divine inscription. The words, enigmatic yet laden with destiny, were spoken with a clarity that cut through the murk of uncertainty. Each syllable carried the burden of impending judgment, a decree that left no room for negotiation or denial. The message was clear, a testament to the transience of power and the inevitable reckoning that awaited those who dared to defy a higher authority. The script, with its 4 distinct parts, spoke of a finality that was both absolute and unyielding. The first word declared that the days of Belshazzar's reign were numbered, an announcement that struck with the finality of a gavel in a silent courtroom. The next uttered that the king had been measured and found wanting, his worth diminished by the weight of his own arrogance. The final pronouncement foretold a division, a fracturing of a kingdom that had once seemed impregnable. It was a sentence that carried the full measure of divine wrath, a reckoning that would unfold in the darkest hours of the night. As Daniel's voice resonated through the silent hall, the atmosphere shifted from one of dread to that of impending catastrophe. The noble revelers, who had once lost themselves in the rapture of decadence, now felt the inexorable pull of destiny. Every beat of the heart, every tremor of the soul, seemed to echo the inexorable march toward a fate that had been written in the stars long before their time. In that crucible of terror and revelation, the ancient power made its final decree, a decree that would shatter the illusion of invincibility and expose the fragility of human pride. The hall, bathed in the cold glow of the divine message, became a stage for the unfolding of a drama that was as old as time itself. The opulence of the surroundings, the glitter of precious metals and the rich hues of silken garments, all seemed to fade into insignificance in the face of the immutable truth that now stood revealed on the wall. The king's trembling form, a stark symbol of a once mighty ruler brought low by his own hubris, served as a reminder that no earthly power could escape the clutches of destiny. The divine inscription, a stark harbinger of doom, left no room for plea or protest. It was a final judgment delivered with unyielding authority. The court was engulfed in an almost palpable silence, the kind that precedes a storm, a silence that spoke of sorrow, regret, and the bitter taste of a future irrevocably altered. Every soul present was caught in the grip of a profound realization. The forces that governed the fate of nations were not to be trifled with. The revelry of the past had been swept away by a tide of destiny, leaving in its wake a legacy of warning and a promise of retribution. In that charged moment, the very fabric of reality seemed to bend under the weight of divine decree. In the days that followed, the story of that night would be recounted in hushed tones, passed down through generations as a testament to the price of insolence. The memory of the feast, with its shimmering allure and devastating climax, served as a cautionary tale, a vivid illustration of the limits of mortal ambition. The man who had once dared to sip from the vessels of sanctity had sealed his fate, and his legacy was now entwined with a destiny written in symbols that no mortal tongue could fully articulate. The vision that had unfolded on the wall was more than just a series of cryptic characters. It was a revelation of the cosmic order, a glimpse into the eternal struggle between pride and humility. It was a story that demanded to be heard, a narrative that spoke to the deepest corners of the human spirit, urging all who listened to remember that power, no matter how vast, was transient when measured against the immutable scales of judgment. The king's face, once radiant with the glow of self-assurance, had become a mirror of despair, a face that now bore the marks of a man who had been confronted by the stark reality of his own insignificance. As the echoes of that fateful night reverberated through the corridors of time, the image of the divine hand continued to haunt the collective memory of a people who had once believed themselves masters of destiny. The symbols, inscribed in a language older than the stones of Babylon, served as a lasting reminder that no ruler, no empire, and no mortal ambition could ever escape the silent, relentless power that governed the cosmos. The hall where the divine message had been delivered remained etched in legend, a place where the ephemeral nature of human glory was laid bare before the watchful eyes of eternity. The energy of that moment, so charged with the weight of impending doom, spilled over into the hearts of every soul present, igniting a spark of introspection and dread. Faces that had been filled with mirth now reflected the cold clarity of truth, a truth that whispered of ancient warnings and unheeded lessons. The revelers, gripped by the memory of that night, began to see beyond the glitter of wealth and the illusion of immortality. They sensed that the narrative of human endeavor was punctuated by moments of reckoning, moments when the very hand of destiny reached out to remind them of their place in the grand design of existence. The king's fall from grace was not an isolated event but part of a larger continuum, a narrative woven through time that chronicled the rise and collapse of empires. The vision on the wall spoke not only of the demise of one ruler but of the cyclical nature of power and the inexorable forces that govern the fate of nations. The ancient script served as an eternal admonition, a message that resonated across the ages, challenging every king and every mortal who dared to place pride above humility. It was a reminder that the scales of justice, ever balanced by a force beyond human ken, would one day tip in favor of those who had learned the lesson of humility. In that charged atmosphere, as the divine message lingered like a specter in the hall, the seeds of change were sown. The hall itself, once a temple to indulgence and excess, became a silent witness to the birth of a new understanding, a recognition that no amount of earthly splendor could withstand the immutable will that had etched its decree on the wall. Every heartbeat in that room, every trembling breath, carried with it the knowledge that destiny was inexorable, and that the legacy of the past would continue to shape the future in ways that defied the arrogance of mortal ambition. As the night deepened and the murmurs of dread gave way to a heavy silence, the vision of that extraordinary hand remained imprinted in the minds of all who bore witness. The memory of the divine inscription lingered, an ever-present reminder that the forces that rule the cosmos are impartial and unyielding. In the quiet that followed, one could almost sense the stirring of ancient winds, a whisper of retribution that had been long foretold and now demanded its due. The story of that night, with its blend of celestial intervention and mortal folly, refused to be forgotten. It lived on as a living testament to the eternal truth that no empire, however mighty, could defy the silent decree of a power that transcended the realm of human understanding. And so, as the echoes of that unforgettable event reverberated into the uncertain future, the vision on the wall remained, a vivid, indelible image that challenged every heart to confront the truth of its own existence. In that moment, beneath the stark gaze of destiny, the very essence of human ambition was laid bare, exposing the fragile veneer of power that could crumble in the blink of an eye. The divine hand had spoken, and its message, etched in the cold stone of Babylon, continued to resonate with an intensity that defied the passage of time. Every whispered recounting of that night served as a somber reminder that in the grand theater of life, no throne was immune to the judgments of fate, and no soul could escape the consequences of its own pride. A silence fell over the crowd, deep and all-encompassing, as if the world itself had paused to honor the profound significance of that revelation. The brilliance of the golden vessels and the opulence of the feast paled in comparison to the stark message now emblazoned on the wall. Faces that had once been alight with the glow of triumph now bore the weight of impending despair, and even the most confident hearts trembled at the sight of that celestial verdict. The air was thick with an unspoken understanding, a collective recognition that history had witnessed such moments before, and that the cycle of human ambition and downfall was as inevitable as the rising and setting of the sun. In that fraught moment, as the divine message continued to hover in the charged stillness, a question echoed in the minds of all who were present, a question that transcended time and space. It was a query that demanded reflection and introspection, a call to acknowledge that no ruler, no nation, no mortal aspiration could escape the inscrutable forces that governed the ultimate destiny of all. The vision on the wall was not merely a harbinger of doom. It was a timeless admonition, a silent call to embrace humility in the face of overwhelming power. The vivid images of that night, the trembling king, the mysterious hand, the sacred vessels defiled by mortal hands, wove themselves into the fabric of memory, destined to be recounted as a lesson for all generations yet to come. The legacy of that fateful evening was one of stark contrast, the splendor of human achievement set against the cold, unyielding force of destiny, a reminder that no throne or triumph was permanent when measured against the relentless march of divine judgment.